They said she was just a princess, until she commanded an army. The council thought she slept late and smiled for ceremonies. They did not know about the late nights, the tools, the models, or the quiet hunger to learn. The lab glowed with hollow screens and the steady pulse of instruments. On the workbench sat a freighter model marked with tiny repairs and new conduit paths. Alara had built that model by hand and by mistakes. Where the court prized manners and lineage, she prized practice and calculations. Tutors had called her curiosity unfit for a princess. She called it necessary. Alara liked ships. She thought of them as systems, things that could be understood, spoken to, and nudged into better behaviors. The palace fleet was grand and slow, excellent for parades and heavy duty, but not for nimble moves. When news arrived that a neighboring system had begun inspecting convoys on a vital trade route, the council answered with rituals, ambassadors, legal protests, and calls for patience. The route fed many colonies. Without it, small towns would struggle. "Send diplomats," Minister Varun said. "We must follow treaties." "The fleet is committed elsewhere," another minister added. "Repairs and schedules prevent sudden action." Alara did not shout, she spoke plainly. "We can move a convoy without drawing the kind of attention a fleet would. Small craft, alternate channels, timing, movement itself can be a defense." A corner of the council laughed. Dismissal tasted familiar. They had made a habit of treating her like a painted object. That habit was her advantage. People who expected little rarely looked for what she did in the dark. She did not ask for permission. She did not demand an audience. Instead, she gathered tools, people, and plans away from watchful eyes. She sought those who had been dismissed by the palace and who still kept skill in their hands. They were eager to build something that mattered. Marin was the first. A retired engineer, he sold clockwork toys near a bakery and pretended to be content. He had once designed courier drives and had been disgraced by a bureaucratic scandal. Alara bought a brass toy as an excuse to speak with him. He showed her faded sketches and old notes. He agreed to help because someone finally asked without condescension. Juno came next. A pilot who had run risky convoys through meteor fields, Juno had lost a license over politics that mistook bravery for recklessness. She drank at a dockside bar and still smiled at the sky. Alara offered a place where skill mattered. Juno wanted the sky to be useful again. Saul, a young tinkerer, joined with wary eyes and quick hands. He lived among engine alleys and had grown used to soldiers who looked down on his kind. The promise of honest work and a leader who listened won him over. He brought small drones and a loud laugh. They met at night in the lab. The group did not care for titles. They cared for the problem. The work began with small, practical changes. Old patrol drones given new protocols, courier hulls lightened and rewired, ancient gyros adapted for speed. Alara sketched routes and tested timing on makeshift models. They practiced communication routines where craft spoke in tight bands with no delay. Alara learned to lead by listening. Court leadership had been about sharp speeches and public gestures. This leadership was about trust and small truths. Mistakes were allowed so long as they taught lessons. If a plan failed, they adjusted. If a system resisted, they learned from it. There was no theater, only craft. Rumors spread anyway. A dockworker mentioned a princess in patched cloak asking questions. A student at the Naval Academy saw a freighter model and told a friend. The gossip reached merchants as curiosity, not threat. People lowered their voices and passed the story like a small wonder. When a fresh report came that a convoy had been delayed and a colony's supplies would last only a month more, Alara felt the hour of testing arrive. The plan was simple in aim. Move a single freighter through the route using an alternate channel and the nimble converted craft as escort. If it succeeded, the council would have to reckon with facts rather than rhetoric. If it failed, they would learn and adapt. Alara did not seek glory. She wanted to keep the line of trade alive. They prepared Meridian, an old freighter with reliable cargo holds. Marin oversaw hull reinforcements and quiet drives. He taught Saul to tune gyros and helped Juno adjust thrusters for finesse rather than speed. They practiced transfers and practiced false manifests that looked dull enough to avoid scrutiny but real enough to be believed. They set decoy transponders and taught the crew how to hold steady under inspection. At dawn before the run, Alara stood with them at the bay. No crown, just clothes that would not insult those who boarded the freighter. She spoke briefly. "We move the Meridian, we show a way." Keep the people fed. If it works, we buy time. If it fails, we learn. We do this for the towns that wait. Marin checked his tools. Juno ran pre-flight checks with the precision of someone who lived for the moment the engines answered her call. Saul adjusted drone swarms with a grin. The crew was small and chosen for steady hands and clear minds. The ship left under quiet stars, a line of light slipping from the docks. Ilara watched until it became a speck. She felt a tremor of fear, small and sharp, and then it steadied into focus. That fear did not come from hubris, it came from care. She understood how small actions kept people fed. After the departure, she returned to the lab and reviewed the plans, checking every code, every signal token twice. The council would call it a stunt. They would say a princess had played at naval command. That would be their choice. Her responsibility was to the people whose lives moved with cargo manifests. As the day drew thin, messages came in measured pulses. The Meridian passed the first inspection without a harsh search. A patrol hailed them and scanned their manifests. The convoy complied with training, and the transponders played their part. The escort drones scattered signals that made the freighter look ordinary and unremarkable. Juno's piloting kept the formation tight and polite. The colony received word. The supplies moved. Word spreads fast in small towns. The mayor's relief hummed across channels like a song. In the palace, meanwhile, discussion turned to how unusual events had gone unnoticed by officials. Some ministers shrugged and called it luck. Others muttered about whether the fleet should have been used. The council's certainties cracked, tiny and inconveniently. Ilara did not let the small victory change her. She celebrated with her team but spent the night updating plans, improving drone coordination, and making redundancy for every critical system. The success taught them something else. The palace could not imagine all the ways to solve a problem. That blindness was a resource if used carefully. In the weeks after the run, her quiet team moved more freighters through alternate channels. Each success brought small adjustments and new recruits, people who had been overlooked in academies, mechanics who had been told their hands were calloused for work, not for leadership. The city noticed a princess in plain clothes more often at the docks. Gossip shifted from mockery to curiosity to cautious respect among those who mattered. The workers, the captains, and the families on distant moons who watched the arrivals. The council's voices grew louder and defensive. Some ministers proposed formal investigations into the improvised fleet. Others feared a scandal if it were discovered the palace had been bypassed. Ilara expected politics. She did not fear it. She preferred to answer with action. One night, while she catalogued spare parts and listened to Juno's stories of narrow escapes, Ilara thought of heritage and expectation. Her title had been given like a script, a role in an old play. She had learned to step out of it not to defy, but to add pages. Command, she realized, was a craft like any other. It required patience, skill, and care. Far from court, stories grew about the quiet fleet that kept small towns fed. They did not call it the palace fleet. They called it stubbornness, courage, and common sense. People began to say the princess was not simple or ornamental. They said she had hands that learned the weight of tools and the grammar of engines. Ilara remembered a letter from a mother on a distant asteroid, written in cramped hand about a child coughing when the fuel ran low last winter. Those ordinary lives mattered more than praise. That memory kept her hands steady. She promised herself she would not let bureaucracy or pride decide who ate or kept warm. She would move the goods, quietly and well, and keep hope alive. She unwound the small clock Marin had sold her on that first day. The gears ticked the way tools do when cared for. The sound was steady and ordinary, and Ilara liked ordinary things that worked. She turned toward the lab and the plans. There would be more nights, more runs, and more learning. The people who depended on the route did not need speeches. They needed cargo. She would move it. The days passed in a rhythm that the palace could hardly notice. While ministers argued and advisors scribbled in endless reports, Princess Ilara's fleet moved quietly and efficiently. Small freighters, once old and slow, now glided along secret channels, carrying supplies to towns and colonies that depended on them. With every successful run, Ilara's confidence grew and the respect of her team deepened. Yet she knew this was only the beginning. The challenge ahead would require more than clever tricks and technical skill. It would require leadership, vision, and trust. Ilara began waking earlier than ever, just before dawn, to review the reports of the previous day. Her lab was alive with the soft hum of engines, drones, and the gentle glow of hollow screens. Marin, ever meticulous, adjusted a small delivery drone while Juno ran simulations of flight routes that grew more complex with each day. Saul, young and energetic, tinkered with sensor arrays, modifying them so the ships could better detect obstacles and communicate silently over long distances. "Morning, Princess," Marin greeted, nodding toward her as she entered. "The Meridian's new guidance system is ready. We've added redundant checks. Should anything fail, it will correct itself automatically." Alara smiled faintly. "Good, we cannot risk delays. The colonies need the cargo on time." She walked past them, examining the array of tools and models. She loved these mornings when her mind was clear, the air quiet, and her team fully focused. Here she was not a princess but a leader in the truest sense, one who inspired and guided rather than demanded obedience. The team had grown, quietly and without fanfare. A few retired navigators, mechanics, and former pilots joined because they wanted to contribute to something that mattered. Alara gave them responsibility and encouraged them to experiment. Mistakes were allowed, but they were carefully analyzed and corrected. Every failure was a lesson, and every success a reason to keep moving forward. Alara also began studying the neighboring system more closely. She had maps, reports, and intelligence gathered discreetly by her small network. The neighboring system was not aggressive in the sense of war, but its influence over the trade route was increasing. Officials were delaying shipments, inspecting cargo excessively, and creating rules that made it difficult for her kingdom to trade efficiently. Most advisors suggested patience, but Alara knew that slow diplomacy would starve the colonies. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Alara gathered her team. She unrolled a large star chart across the table. Tiny holographic markers flickered over the routes they had already used. "We need to expand our range," she said. "The main route is being watched more closely. Our previous paths won't be safe much longer. We need new channels, new techniques, and faster deliveries. We must stay ahead of them not by force but by ingenuity." Juno leaned over, tracing a possible flight path with her finger. "There's a series of small moons here," she said. "We could use them to mask our movements." The sensors in the neighboring system rarely scan these smaller celestial bodies. Saul's eyes lit up. "We can use mini-drones to create decoy signals," he added. "They'll appear as freighters, but in reality the real ships can move undetected." "It's not lying, it's smart coordination," Marin nodded thoughtfully. "We can also modify the ship's hulls to reduce their heat signature and radar reflection. If combined with timing and decoys, it will make detection extremely difficult." Alara's heart raced with excitement. This was exactly the kind of challenge she loved, combining engineering, strategy, and human skill to solve a problem creatively. "Prepare the test run," she ordered. "We will move one freighter through this new route tomorrow at dawn. Everyone must be ready." The night was filled with preparation. Ships were inspected, drones tested, and data simulations ran again and again. Alara walked among her team, offering advice, listening to ideas, and making small adjustments. She did not order recklessly, she guided carefully, allowing her team to contribute to the plan's success. Leadership, she had learned, was not about giving commands but about inspiring confidence. By the next morning, the fleet was ready. The freighter, loaded with critical supplies, gleamed under the soft light of the dawn. Alara's team moved with precision. Every signal was double-checked, every maneuver practiced. The decoy drones were launched first, weaving through the space around the moons. Then the freighter, accompanied by Juno's pilot team, followed the planned path carefully, remaining hidden behind celestial bodies and moving silently across sensor grids. Alara watched from the control room, her mind analyzing every detail. The freighter passed the first inspection point undetected. The decoy drones did their job perfectly, diverting attention and creating confusion. The second inspection point was more complex, but Saul's enhancements kept the communications secure, and the freighter slipped through safely. By midday, the shipment had reached its destination. The town officials celebrated quietly, grateful for the timely arrival of supplies. Alara's heart lifted at the thought of children receiving food and families avoiding hardship. Success was not measured in trophies or titles, but in the lives improved by her careful planning. Back at the lab, the team gathered to review the run. Each member noted observations, improvements, and potential challenges for future routes. Alara encouraged discussion, careful critique, and creative suggestions. Her leadership style allowed people to feel ownership of the success. Next, we need to consider speed, Alara said thoughtfully. We cannot rely on the same routes for long. We need flexibility. We need to stay one step ahead in planning, monitoring, and execution. Marin raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting more frequent runs or more alternative paths? Both, Alara replied. We will increase the number of shipments while keeping safety and precision. Each freighter will move carefully but with multiple routes prepared. We will also expand the fleet gradually, bringing in more craft and more skilled people. The following weeks became a rhythm of careful planning and precise execution. The fleet expanded to include small, fast freighters and transport ships designed for stealth and agility. Drones and sensor systems became more sophisticated, able to predict and avoid inspection patterns. People began noticing. Merchants whispered about the princess who worked among the docks in plain clothes. Families spoke in hushed tones about supplies arriving exactly when promised. Even the neighboring system began to wonder why their inspections seemed increasingly ineffective. Alara did not seek recognition. She sought results, and she got them. The palace could not ignore the success. Ministers demanded explanations, yet the reports provided little clarity. The freighters arrived without incident, advisors reported. It is unclear how this happened. Alara remained quiet, observing the council's confusion with patience. They had underestimated her intelligence, her vision, and the ingenuity of her team. Alara also began mentoring her growing network. She taught young engineers, pilots, and planners the principles of observation, analysis, and problem-solving. She emphasized the importance of moral responsibility alongside technical skill. We do not move these goods for power or praise, she told them. We do it for people who depend on us. That is our priority. Everything else comes after. One evening, as the fleet prepared for another run, Alara took a moment to look at the stars. The distant lights reminded her of the colonies scattered across space, each relying on careful planning and steady hands. She imagined the towns, the children, the families. They did not know her personally, but her decisions shaped their lives. That realization was both humbling and inspiring. Her team gathered around her as she shared the next route plan. The task was more complex, longer distances, more inspection points, and less predictable patterns. Yet the team met the challenge with enthusiasm. They trusted her because she had trusted them, and they respected her because she led with knowledge and care rather than authority alone. The freighters launched, and the mission proceeded with flawless coordination. Each obstacle was met with clever solutions: decoys, rerouted paths, silent communications, and careful timing. By the end of the day, the supplies had reached multiple colonies, each arrival marked by relief and quiet gratitude. Alara allowed herself a small smile. This was exactly what she had worked for. Not glory, not applause, but steady, reliable help for those in need. Her efforts were making a real difference, and she knew that as long as she continued to innovate, lead carefully, and inspire her team, there was no challenge they could not face. In the quiet moments after the operations, she reflected on what had been achieved. The neighboring system had not been defeated, they had merely been outsmarted. Alara did not rejoice in that. Instead, she thought about the possibilities. If she could maintain these supply lines and continue to adapt, she could ensure peace, stability, and prosperity without needing conflict. She understood the power of creativity, foresight, and trust. Her team, once a handful of overlooked individuals, had become a small but remarkable fleet of thinkers, engineers, and pilots. They had transformed old ships into tools of precision, old routines into clever strategies, and old ideas into practical solutions. Every member was invested, not because of rank, but because they saw the difference they could make. Alara's vision grew. She began mapping longer-term strategies, planning for a network of trade routes that would withstand future challenges, and considering alliances with other neutral systems who could benefit from her methods. She thought of ways to teach her principles of leadership and innovation to younger generations, creating a culture of ingenuity and responsibility. At night, when the palace was quiet and the stars bright, she sometimes thought about the court, the ministers, and the skeptics. They still underestimated her, still measured her by ceremony rather than competence. That suited her perfectly. Underestimation allowed her freedom to build, to experiment, and to succeed quietly. When the time came, they would see the truth, not because she demanded it, but because her results could not be ignored. Alara's work was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, new obstacles, and unforeseen complications. But she faced them with calm determination. Each success built upon the last, each lesson strengthened the next, and each small victory reminded her that true leadership came from action, intelligence, and care for those who depended on her. And so, the princess who had been dismissed as ornamental continued her quiet revolution. The fleet grew, the colonies thrived, and the story of her ingenuity spread across whispers and tales. People began to understand that leadership was not in titles or crowns, but in skill, wisdom, and the courage to act. Princess Alara's journey had only begun, and already she had changed the course of her kingdom's future. The success of the new routes had brought quiet admiration from some quarters, but it also attracted attention Alara could not ignore. Officials from other systems began to observe the kingdom more closely. The neighboring system, whose inspections had once been manageable, now sent more patrols, mapped sensor grids more carefully, and occasionally tested the flexibility of her operations. Alara understood that these actions were not hostility in the traditional sense, but they carried potential risk. If mismanaged, small missteps could grow into larger problems. She accepted the challenge, as she always did, not with fear but with careful thought. Alara gathered her team in the lab, the same room where the first freighter had been tested and launched months ago. Though the space had expanded with new equipment, the atmosphere remained unchanged, focused, deliberate, and collaborative. She spread a holographic map across the table, showing the neighboring system's patrol patterns and sensor coverage. "This is no longer a simple trade route," she began, her finger tracing a line between two colonies. "We must think like them. Predict their expectations, find the spaces they cannot control, and create paths that let our supplies reach those who need them without drawing unnecessary attention." Juno leaned forward, studying the map. "We'll need more agility than before," she said. "The old freighters can't move as fast, and we have fewer blind spots to hide in." Saul's fingers flew over a small interface, testing simulations of multiple paths simultaneously. "We can use synchronized drones to create artificial congestion in sensor networks," he suggested. "It won't harm anyone, but it will make it appear as though freighters are in one place while the real ships pass unnoticed." Marin nodded thoughtfully. "And if we upgrade some engines for short bursts, we can move through these tighter channels without slowing the cargo delivery. I'll begin the modifications immediately." Alara smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of planning and problem-solving. She had always enjoyed puzzles, and this challenge combined engineering, strategy, and human skill in a way few other tasks could. "Let's prepare the first test," she said. "We'll start with one freighter, 2 escort ships, and a drone cloud. Observe, record, and adjust as we go." Preparation took several days. Every ship was checked and rechecked, drones tested for coordination and reliability, and communications secured against interference. The team worked long hours, but morale remained high because each member felt responsible for the success of the mission. Alara had created an environment where skill was valued above title, where curiosity and careful thought mattered more than obedience, and where every voice could contribute to the outcome. Finally, the fleet was ready. The freighter, its hull modified for reduced detection, sat quietly in the launch bay. The escort ships hummed in readiness, and the drones floated in formation, awaiting precise instructions. Alara's team took their positions, each monitoring a specific element of the mission. "Remember," she reminded them, "our goal is efficiency and precision. No unnecessary maneuvers, no risks beyond what is planned. We move with intelligence, not speed alone. Every shipment is a promise to someone who depends on us." The freighter left the bay smoothly, a line of light against the dark backdrop of space. The drones moved ahead, simulating false paths, while Juno guided the freighter through previously unexplored channels. Every system was monitored carefully: energy usage, communication signals, sensor detection. Alara and her team adjusted settings in real time, making minute corrections that kept the freighter invisible to prying sensors. As the freighter neared the first inspection zone, a small problem arose. One of the drones experienced a software glitch, causing it to deviate slightly from its intended path. Alara's fingers moved over the control panel, recalculating positions and issuing commands in an intuitive flow. Saul quickly implemented a backup program he had prepared for such situations, and the drone returned to its formation without compromising the freighter's concealment. "Good thinking," Alara said, glancing at Saul with quiet approval. "Always expect the unexpected and always have a solution ready." By midday, the freighter had passed the second inspection zone. Juno maneuvered with calm precision, navigating tight channels and subtle gravitational fields of small moons that blocked sensors. Marin monitored energy consumption, ensuring the ships maintained efficiency without drawing excess power that could reveal their position. The drones continued to provide artificial signals, masking the real freighter's movement from external observers. The freighter arrived at its destination colony without incident. Officials greeted it with quiet relief, confirming the arrival of much-needed supplies. Families received food, water, and essential goods just as Alara had promised. The team allowed themselves a brief moment of satisfaction, but Alara reminded them that one success did not end the challenge. "We learn from every run," she said. "Even if nothing goes wrong, we look for ways to improve. Complacency is the enemy of efficiency." In the following weeks, Alara continued refining her operations. She trained additional pilots, engineers, and navigators, expanding the fleet gradually while maintaining the same high standards. The system of routes became more complex, with multiple channels and contingency plans. The drones became smarter, able to adjust formations and signals autonomously, and the freighters more agile, capable of precise maneuvers under Juno's skilled piloting. Word of Alara's work began to spread beyond the colonies she directly supplied. Traders, merchants, and even officials from other neutral systems whispered about the princess who managed deliveries with unmatched skill and care. They did not see her in the ceremonial halls or at public events. They saw the results of her planning and the reliability of her operations. Stories of her ingenuity inspired others, quietly challenging assumptions about what leadership could be. At the palace, the council could no longer ignore the achievements. Some ministers acknowledged her success reluctantly, though they continued to debate the implications. Others tried to claim credit or minimize her role. Alara remained calm, knowing that recognition was not her goal. Her focus remained on results, on the people who depended on her work, on the colonies that received supplies, and on the team that trusted her guidance. One day, as Alara reviewed new data, she noticed an unusual pattern in the neighboring system's patrols. They had begun to anticipate some of the previous routes, but the data was inconsistent. Their coverage had blind spots created by terrain, sensor limitations, and predictable schedules. Alara realized this presented an opportunity. She could expand operations into areas previously considered too risky, using the lessons learned from past missions to navigate these gaps. She called her team together. "We have an opening," she explained, pointing at the holographic map. "We can use these blind spots to move more freighters, expand supplies, and support more colonies. It will require careful timing, perfect coordination, and precision beyond what we have done before." "Are you ready?" Juno nodded confidently. "We've faced difficult runs before. This is no different, just more complex." Saul grinned. "I've already started designing enhanced drones for this. They'll cover more area and provide better masking for the freighters." Marin added, "I can modify the engines for short bursts so we can maneuver through these areas quickly and efficiently." Alara felt a surge of pride. Her team was ready, skilled, and motivated. They were not following orders blindly. They were thinking, creating, and adapting. Leadership, she knew, was not about giving commands, but about inspiring collaboration and fostering trust. The first run through the new route began at dawn. The freighter, escorted by agile ships and shielded by sophisticated drones, moved carefully through uncharted channels. Every element of the operation was monitored and adjusted in real time. Sensor data, energy consumption, and positional tracking were all fine-tuned to ensure success. At one point, a patrol unexpectedly shifted its route, threatening to intercept the freighter. Alara quickly recalculated positions, issuing silent commands to the drones to create new decoy signals and guiding Juno to adjust the freighter's course slightly. The maneuver was executed flawlessly, and the freighter passed undetected. By midday, the supplies had reached their destinations. Officials and citizens alike expressed gratitude, unaware of the careful planning and subtle maneuvers that had ensured their arrival. Alara allowed herself a quiet smile. The success was not measured by applause, but by the lives touched and the trust earned. In the following weeks, the expanded operations became routine, though each run required focus, innovation, and careful monitoring. Alara's fleet became a symbol of ingenuity and dedication, inspiring those who observed it. Her team grew in confidence and skill, learning to anticipate challenges, adapt to unexpected situations, and work together seamlessly. Even the neighboring system began to notice. They could not explain how shipments consistently arrived without interference. Their inspectors grew frustrated, and their officials speculated about clever technology or undiscovered methods. Alara did not seek confrontation. She focused on solving problems and improving efficiency. Her intelligence, creativity, and foresight allowed her to stay ahead without engaging in conflict. Alara also began to consider the long-term future. She mapped potential alliances, supply chain expansions, and methods to teach her principles of leadership, innovation, and responsibility to younger generations. Her vision was broader than immediate success. She aimed to create a culture of intelligence, ethics, and collaboration that would endure beyond her own actions. At night, when the lab was quiet and the stars shone brightly, Alara reflected on how far they had come. The fleet, once a small group of overlooked individuals, had become a highly skilled network capable of navigating complex challenges. Every ship, drone, and freighter symbolized ingenuity, careful planning, and the dedication of people working together toward a common goal. She thought of the colonies, the families, and the children who relied on her efforts. The thought grounded her. Leadership, she realized, was not about titles or ceremonies. It was about responsibility, knowledge, and empathy. She had once been dismissed as ornamental, unfit to lead, and insignificant in the eyes of the court. Now she was quietly proving otherwise, not through force, but through skill, foresight, and care for others. As the weeks passed, the fleet continued its missions, growing in capability and confidence. Alara's strategies became more sophisticated, incorporating lessons from each run and preparing for unforeseen challenges. She maintained the same calm focus, the same encouragement of innovation, and the same commitment to her people. The neighboring system, though observant, could not match the precision, flexibility, and intelligence of Alara's operations. Their patrols became increasingly irrelevant, unable to predict or intercept the fleet's carefully planned movements. Alara had created a system in which skill, collaboration, and ingenuity outmatched brute oversight or authority. By the end of the season, the colonies had never been better supplied, and the network of routes had expanded beyond anything the Council had imagined. The freighters moved reliably, the drones coordinated flawlessly, and the people's lives improved as a direct result of careful, thoughtful planning. Alara looked at her team, the freighters lined up for the next run, and the holographic maps displaying routes and contingencies. "We have done well," she said quietly. "But our work is not done. There will always be new challenges. We adapt, we learn, and we continue. Our goal is not recognition, but reliability, not glory, but service." Her team nodded, inspired by her words and confident in her guidance. Together, they represented more than skill. They represented a philosophy of leadership built on intelligence, ethics, and careful planning. And so, the princess who had once been dismissed as ornamental continued her quiet revolution, leading her fleet with intelligence, foresight, and care. The neighboring system remained unaware of the full extent of her strategies, and the colonies thrived under her guidance. Alara's work was far from complete, but each success reinforced the truth she had long known. Leadership is not inherited or granted. It is earned through skill, vision, and unwavering commitment to those who depend on you. The months of careful planning, testing, and execution had transformed Princess Alara's fleet into something remarkable. What had begun as a small operation with a few retrofitted freighters had grown into a fully coordinated network of supply lines, agile transport ships, and intelligent drones. Every delivery was precise, every route calculated, every obstacle anticipated. The colonies that once faced delays and shortages now flourished under the quiet efficiency of her efforts. Yet Alara knew that this progress could not remain small. The neighboring system had begun noticing irregularities. Their inspectors could not pinpoint the cause, but the constant arrival of freighters had raised eyebrows. Rumors circulated of a clever leader within the kingdom, one who anticipated patrols, masked cargo, and managed the entire operation with unmatched intelligence. Some officials in the neighboring system dismissed the idea as exaggeration, but Alara knew they would eventually act if they discovered the truth. She called her team together in the lab for a discussion. The space was busy with holographic maps, models of freighters, and lines of data tracking their most recent routes. Every surface was a canvas for strategy, and every team member was focused on the task at hand. "We are operating successfully, but attention is increasing," Alara began. "We have maintained reliability, but we cannot be predictable. The neighboring system is noticing patterns, even if they do not fully understand them. We need to ensure flexibility, redundancy, and intelligence at every step." Juno leaned over the map. "We can create multiple layers of routes and schedules," she suggested. "Even if they start inspecting certain areas more carefully, we can redirect freighters dynamically. The drones can simulate multiple decoy ships, making it impossible to tell where the real shipments are moving." Saul tapped his tablet thoughtfully. "I can program the drones to adjust autonomously based on sensor readings. If an inspection pattern changes, they can react immediately, guiding the freighters without delay or detection." Marin nodded, adding, "We can also increase fleet communication efficiency. Every ship can share real-time updates and coordinate maneuvers without relying on fixed commands. It will make our operations faster and more resilient." Alara smiled, feeling a familiar thrill of challenge. This was not about brute force or confrontation. This was about intelligence, ingenuity, and careful planning. She loved this kind of problem, where thinking ahead, teamwork, and creative solutions could achieve results far greater than power alone. Over the next several weeks, the team worked tirelessly. Freighters were retrofitted with the latest technology, drones programmed for multiple contingencies, and routes expanded to include safe passages previously unexplored. The team simulated countless scenarios, each one teaching new lessons and revealing opportunities for improvement. Alara led with quiet authority, encouraging collaboration, valuing ideas, and fostering an environment where mistakes were treated as learning experiences rather than failures. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, Alara reflected on how far they had come. The fleet had grown from a few old ships into a sophisticated network capable of handling complex challenges. Her team had evolved from a handful of overlooked individuals into skilled professionals capable of independent thought and rapid adaptation. The colonies were thriving, and every shipment reached its destination with precision. Yet she knew the ultimate test had not yet come. The neighboring system, while still cautious, had begun sending more frequent patrols. Alara realized that sooner or later, they might attempt to monitor the entire route or interfere directly. She did not fear confrontation in the traditional sense, but she understood the stakes. If she wanted to protect her people and maintain reliable supply lines, she needed a plan that could withstand scrutiny without ever resorting to aggression. She called her team together the following morning. "We are entering a new phase," she announced. "Our operations are effective, but predictability is our greatest risk. We must design a system that is self-sustaining, adaptive, and capable of handling increased oversight without compromising efficiency or safety." Juno raised an eyebrow. "Are we talking about automated decision-making for the fleet?" "Partly," Alara replied. "But it's more than that. We need to create a system where ships, drones, and crew can react intelligently to unforeseen circumstances. Every shipment should reach its destination, even if conditions change. We are building not just a fleet, but a network of human and technological intelligence working together." Saul grinned. "I've been testing autonomous adjustments for drones. They can already respond to sensor changes, obstacles, and navigation shifts. With enhancements, they could guide freighters almost independently while remaining connected to command." Marin added, "We can integrate real-time updates across all ships." If one freighter encounters a problem, the others can adapt instantly. It will be seamless, reliable, and efficient. Alara nodded. Exactly. Prepare a simulation for tomorrow. We will test the system end-to-end using multiple freighters, escort ships, and drones. Every decision will be made collaboratively by technology and human judgment. We need to see how adaptable we can make the operation. The simulation began at dawn. Multiple freighters, each carrying supplies for different colonies, left the bay simultaneously. Escort ships moved in coordinated formations while drones created decoy signals, masked paths, and transmitted continuous updates. The team monitored every movement, adjusting strategies in real time. Unexpected challenges arose immediately. One freighter experienced a minor sensor malfunction, and a drone temporarily lost coordination. Alara observed calmly, issuing subtle adjustments while allowing the team and systems to respond. Saul's autonomous programming corrected the drone's path, while Juno skillfully guided the freighter through a tight passage. The adjustments were subtle but critical, demonstrating the strength of the combined human and technological approach. By midday, all freighters had successfully reached their destinations. Supplies arrived without delays, the colonies were provided for, and every system functioned within optimal parameters. Alara allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The simulation had proven the effectiveness of the enhanced fleet, showing that intelligence, foresight, and collaboration could overcome complexity without force or confrontation. Word of the fleet's reliability began to spread across neighboring systems. Merchants, traders, and officials marveled at the kingdom's ability to maintain precise deliveries under increased observation. The neighboring system grew curious and cautious, unable to fully understand the methods that allowed consistent success. Alara's quiet leadership and ingenuity had created both respect and uncertainty, without any need for aggression or conflict. As the weeks passed, Alara continued to refine the fleet and operations. She expanded training programs for new recruits, mentoring engineers, pilots, and strategists. She emphasized adaptability, creativity, and moral responsibility. Our success is not just in delivery, she told them. It is in understanding the people we serve, the impact of our actions, and the responsibility we bear. Skill without care is meaningless. Intelligence without ethics is empty. We must combine all of these. The fleet became a model of efficiency, collaboration, and innovation. The freighters moved through increasingly complex routes, drones adapted to dynamic conditions, and crews worked with confidence and precision. The neighboring system continued to observe, unable to predict or replicate the methods. Alara had achieved something remarkable, a network of human and technological ingenuity that functioned flawlessly, not through force, but through intelligence, planning, and care. One afternoon, Alara received a message from a distant colony. The letter described how timely shipments had transformed the lives of children, families, and communities. Schools were thriving, medical supplies arrived on time, and families had enough food to last through the season. The message was heartfelt and full of gratitude. Alara felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that her work had tangible, positive effects on real lives. Back at the lab, the team gathered to review the latest missions and plan for future expansions. Alara addressed them with calm authority. We have accomplished much, but we must remain vigilant. Efficiency, reliability, and adaptability will always be our guiding principles. Our work is never complete. There are always new challenges, and we must be ready to face them with intelligence, creativity, and care. Juno spoke up. You've shown us how much we can achieve when we trust each other and combine our skills. It's more than engineering or piloting. It's about thinking ahead, understanding consequences, and helping people. Saul added, it's incredible to see how the fleet works as a whole. Every small adjustment, every minor decision matters. Together, we've built something larger than ourselves. Marin nodded. And we've learned that leadership is not about giving orders, but about inspiring collaboration, fostering innovation, and guiding with understanding. Alara felt a quiet pride. She had begun as a princess dismissed by her court, underestimated and considered ornamental. Now she had built a fleet, mentored a team, and created a system that delivered life-saving supplies with precision and care. Her leadership had inspired confidence. Her ingenuity had solved complex problems, and her moral responsibility had ensured that every action served the greater good. In the quiet moments when the lab was empty and the stars shone brightly beyond the windows, Alara reflected on the journey. She had taken risks, faced skepticism, and relied on her team's skills and intelligence. Every obstacle had been met with careful thought, every challenge with creativity, and every success with humility. She understood that leadership was not about titles, ceremony, or recognition. It was about responsibility, action, and the ability to inspire others to achieve greatness together. As the fleet prepared for another series of missions, Alara looked at the ships, the drones, and the holographic maps tracking routes across the colonies. She felt a deep sense of purpose. The work was ongoing, the challenges never-ending, but the results were clear. Communities were thriving, the fleet operated flawlessly, and her leadership had proven the value of human ingenuity, collaboration, and ethical action. The neighboring system, though still observing, had no way to challenge the operations effectively. They could not predict every route, anticipate every adjustment, or replicate the seamless coordination of human and technological intelligence. Alara had achieved a victory not through conflict, but through skill, vision, and careful planning. Her team, once a small group of overlooked individuals, now represented the power of collaboration, innovation, and moral responsibility. Each member had grown in confidence and capability, inspired by a leader who valued intelligence, ethics, and the greater good above titles or ceremony. Alara knew that her work would continue, but she also knew that the principles she had instilled, creativity, careful planning, adaptability, and moral responsibility, would endure. The fleet was more than ships and drones. It was a living system of human ingenuity and foresight. It represented the idea that leadership, intelligence, and care could solve problems where force or authority alone could not. As night fell and the stars glittered across the sky, Alara stood at the observation deck, watching freighters move silently along distant routes. She felt a quiet satisfaction. Her efforts had transformed her role from a dismissed princess into a leader capable of inspiring, guiding, and protecting countless lives. The fleet, her team, and the colonies they served were proof of what could be achieved when intelligence, foresight, and moral responsibility guided action. Princess Alara smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges, unexpected obstacles, and opportunities to innovate. Yet she was ready, because she had learned that leadership is not inherited, titles do not define capability, and the greatest achievements come from intelligence, care, and collaboration. And so, the princess who had once been underestimated, dismissed, and considered ornamental continued to lead, not through force, but through vision, ingenuity, and moral courage. Her fleet moved silently across the stars, her colonies thrived, and her team worked together in harmony, proving that human intelligence, ethical action, and collaboration could achieve remarkable results. Alara's legacy was not in crowns, ceremonies, or empty praise. It was in thriving communities, reliable fleets, inspired teams, and a network of human ingenuity that had transformed her kingdom. She had shown the universe that leadership, intelligence, and care could move mountains without breaking a single rule, harming a single life, or raising a hand in anger. As she watched the freighters disappear into the starlight, Alara whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." Her story, quiet yet profound, was a testament to human ingenuity, moral responsibility, and the power of leadership built on knowledge, foresight, and care. Across the stars, the impact of her vision continued to grow, unseen by many, but felt by all who depended on her wisdom. They said she was just a princess, until she commanded an army